Marcus Chen stood on the corner of 5th Street, looking at the building in front of him. Riverside Memorial Hospital rose up into the evening sky like a giant made of glass and concrete. The last rays of sunlight reflected off its windows, making them shine like gold. Marcus shifted the weight of his violin case from one hand to the other. It was heavy, not because of the instrument inside, but because of everything it represented. 3 years. It had been 3 years since his life had changed completely. He remembered the day clearly. It was a Tuesday morning when the director of the Central Valley Orchestra had called everyone into the rehearsal hall. Marcus had thought it was just another meeting. Maybe they would discuss the upcoming season or plan a tour. He had been wrong. Budget cuts, the director had said. The words still echoed in his mind. They had to let some musicians go. Marcus had been one of them. At 31 years old, he had suddenly found himself without a job, without a purpose, without the one thing that had defined his entire adult life. Before that day, Marcus had been a professional violinist. He had worn a clean tuxedo to every performance. He had played in concert halls where people paid good money to sit in velvet seats and listen. He had felt important, valued, like his music mattered. Now at 34, things were very different. His tuxedo hung in the back of his tiny apartment closet, covered in a plastic bag he never opened. Instead, he wore old jeans with a small tear in the left knee and a faded blue jacket that had seen better days. His shoes were scuffed and worn at the heels. Marcus had become what people called a street musician. Every day he picked a spot somewhere in the city and played his violin for whoever walked by. Sometimes people stopped to listen. Most times they did not. They hurried past him with their phones pressed to their ears or their eyes locked on the sidewalk. Some dropped coins into his open violin case. A few gave dollar bills. On good days, he made enough money to pay his rent and buy food. On bad days, he went home with less than $10 and a headache from standing for hours. The hospital had not been his first choice for today. Marcus usually avoided this place. Too many memories lived inside those walls. 2 years ago, his mother had been a patient here. Cancer, the doctors had said. Stage 4. There was nothing they could do except make her comfortable. Marcus had spent weeks walking these same hallways, riding the elevators up to the 6th floor, sitting in uncomfortable chairs beside her bed. He had played violin for her sometimes, soft and gentle, trying to bring her peace. She had smiled and closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Then one morning, she was gone, but tonight was different. Tonight, Marcus needed to be here. He told himself it was because this spot had good foot traffic. People leaving their shifts at the hospital. Visitors going home after seeing loved ones. Doctors and nurses finishing long days. They might be in a generous mood. They might stop and listen. They might give him enough money to make this day worth it. That was what he told himself. Deep down, though, he knew the real reason. He needed to feel close to his mother again, even if it hurt. Marcus walked to a spot about 20 feet from the main entrance. This was far enough to not block the doors, but close enough that people would hear his music as they came and went. He set down his case and opened it carefully. Inside, his violin rested on faded blue velvet. The instrument was old, maybe 60 or 70 years. It had belonged to his grandfather, who had given it to Marcus when he was just 8 years old. The wood was dark and rich, with small scratches and marks that told stories of all the music it had played over the decades. He lifted the violin out and checked the strings. They were still in tune from his last performance that morning outside Central Station. Good. He did not want to waste time tuning when he could be playing. Marcus reached into his case and pulled out his bow. The horsehair was getting worn. He would need to have it replaced soon, but that cost money he did not have right now. For now, it would work. Marcus opened a small container of rosin and rubbed it along the bow hair. The rosin made the bow sticky so it could grab the strings and make sound. Without rosin, the bow would just slide across the strings silently. As he worked the rosin back and forth, he looked around at his surroundings. The evening air was cool. Autumn had arrived and soon winter would follow. Playing outside in winter was hard. His fingers got cold and stiff. The violin did not like the cold either. But that was months away. Tonight the weather was perfect. A few people walked past him as he prepared. They glanced at him quickly, then looked away. Marcus was used to this. Most people did not want to make eye contact with street musicians. Maybe they felt guilty for not stopping. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe they did not care about music at all. It did not matter. Marcus was not doing this for them. Not really. He was doing it because playing violin was the only thing he knew how to do. It was who he was. He placed the violin under his chin and felt the familiar comfort of the wood against his skin. His left hand curved around the neck of the instrument. His fingers found their positions on the strings without him having to think about it. Muscle memory. After 26 years of playing, his body knew what to do. His right hand held the bow lightly but firmly, ready to draw sound from the strings. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. This was his ritual before every performance. Whether it was in front of thousands of people in a concert hall or just a few strangers on a street corner, he needed to center himself. He needed to forget about his problems and his empty bank account and his tiny apartment with the broken heater. He needed to become just the music. He decided to start with something beautiful and sad. Meditation from Thais by Massenet. It was a piece his mother had loved. She used to hum it while cooking dinner or folding laundry. When Marcus had played it at her funeral, he had barely made it through without breaking down. But now, 2 years later, he could play it and feel her presence without falling apart. It was like a conversation with her, carried on the notes of his violin. Marcus lifted the bow to the strings. He was about to play the first note when movement caught his eye. A man in a dark blue uniform was walking toward him from the hospital entrance. Marcus recognized the uniform immediately. Security guard. His heart sank a little. He knew what was coming. The guard was a tall man, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair cut very short. His face was serious, not mean exactly, but not friendly either. The kind of face that said this man had a job to do and he was going to do it. He had a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt and a flashlight in a holder on his hip. His shoes were black and shiny, the kind that made clicking sounds on tile floors. Marcus lowered his violin and bowed. He had been through this many times before. Different cities, different locations, but always the same conversation. The guard would tell him he could not play here. Marcus would apologize and pack up his things. He would walk away and find another spot. That was how it always went. The security guard stopped a few feet away from Marcus. His name tag said Gerald Thompson. He looked at Marcus, then at the violin, then at the open case on the ground. "Evening," Gerald said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel. "Good evening," Marcus replied. He tried to sound polite and respectful. Maybe if he was nice enough, the guard would give him a few minutes before making him leave. "You planning to play here?" Gerald asked. He already knew the answer. This was just how these conversations started. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "I was just about to begin." "Is that a problem?" Gerald nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is. Hospital property. We don't allow solicitation or performances on the grounds. Company policy." Marcus felt disappointment settle in his chest like a stone. He had expected this, but it still hurt. "I understand," he said. "I was not trying to cause any trouble. I will move to the sidewalk across the street." "Would that be okay?" Gerald looked across the street, then back at Marcus. "Sidewalk's public property. Not my concern what you do over there. Just not here." "Right," Marcus said. He bent down to put his violin back in the case. His movements were slow and careful. The violin was the most valuable thing he owned. Not in money, but in meaning. He could not afford to drop it or damage it in any way. As he placed the instrument on the velvet lining, Marcus felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He was tired. Not just physically tired from standing all day, but tired deep in his soul. Tired of being moved along like he was doing something wrong. Tired of seeing people look at him with pity or disgust, or worse, not seeing him at all. Tired of wondering if this was all his life would ever be. He had dreamed of being a great violinist when he was young. He had imagined playing solo concerts in famous halls around the world. He had wanted to record albums and teach at a prestigious music school. He had wanted to matter. Instead, here he was, being told to leave a hospital parking lot because his presence was not welcome. Marcus picked up his bow and was about to place it in the case when he heard something. A voice, a young voice, a child's voice. "Please don't stop." He looked up. Running toward him from the hospital entrance was a little girl. "Will you play something, Marcus?" Emma asked. "Just one song?" Marcus looked up at Gerald. The security guard was standing very still, his face unreadable. They both knew the rule. No performances on hospital property. But they also both knew what was really at stake here. This was not about rules. This was about a little girl who needed something beautiful in her life. something to remind her that the world was not just hospitals and needles and medicine. Gerald looked at Emma, then at Marcus, then at David. Finally, he let out a long breath through his nose. His jaw was tight like he was fighting with himself. Then he held up one finger. "One song," Gerald said. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "You play one song, then you're gone. Understood?" Marcus felt relief flood through him. "Understood. Thank you." Emma clapped her hands together, a huge smile spreading across her pale face. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Marcus stood up and positioned his violin under his chin again. He looked down at Emma. "What would you like to hear?" he asked. Emma thought for a moment, her small face serious. "Something that sounds like hope," she finally said. "My grandma used to hum something. I don't know the name, but it made me feel like everything would be okay, even when things were scary. Can you play something like that?" Marcus felt tears threatening to form in his eyes, but he blinked them back. He did not know the specific tune Emma's grandmother had hummed, but he understood the feeling she was describing. Hope. That was what this little girl needed. That was what her father needed. That was what Marcus himself needed. "I'll play something for you," Marcus said. "It won't be exactly what your grandma played, but I'll try to make it sound like hope." Emma nodded and stepped back to stand beside her father. David put both hands on her shoulders, holding her steady. Gerald stood off to the side, his arms crossed over his chest, but his face had softened just a little. Marcus closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and then he began to play. The first note that came from Marcus's violin was soft and gentle. It floated into the evening air like a whisper. He did not play any song he had memorized or performed before. Instead, he let his fingers move on their own, guided by feeling rather than memory. This was improvisation, something he had rarely done in his years with the orchestra. Back then, every note was written on a page. Every piece was planned and rehearsed 100 times. But here, on this hospital parking lot with a sick little girl watching him with hopeful eyes, Marcus let go of all the rules. He let the music come from somewhere deeper than technique or training. The melody started slow and uncertain, like the first steps of someone learning to walk. Then it grew stronger, more confident. Marcus kept his eyes closed as he played, but he could feel Emma's presence in front of him. He could sense her father's anxiety and Gerald's careful watching. He played for all of them, but mostly he played for Emma. Each note was a gift he was giving her. Each phrase was a promise that beauty still existed in the world, even in the darkest times. As Marcus played, something strange began to happen. He felt himself transported back in time. He was no longer standing outside Riverside Memorial Hospital. He was 12 years old again, playing in his childhood bedroom. His mother was sitting on his bed, listening with her eyes closed and a peaceful smile on her face. She always said that music had power. It could heal wounds that medicine could not touch. It could lift spirits that nothing else could reach. Young Marcus had not fully understood what she meant back then. But now, playing for Emma, he finally got it. The melody shifted and changed as Marcus played. It moved from soft to strong, from sad to joyful, from fear to courage. He was telling a story without words. The story was about struggle and survival. It was about pain and hope existing side by side. It was about a little girl fighting a terrible disease but still finding reasons to smile. It was about a father holding his daughter through the worst days of their lives. It was about a security guard with a tough job learning when rules needed to bend. And it was about a broken musician finding purpose again in an unexpected moment. Marcus's bow danced across the strings. His left hand moved up and down the neck of the violin, finding notes high and low. The music swelled and filled the space around them. It echoed off the hospital walls. It drifted through the parking lot. It rose up into the darkening sky, and people began to notice. A nurse who had been walking to her car stopped in her tracks. She stood frozen, listening, her purse hanging from her shoulder and her keys in her hand. Her name was Janet Rodriguez, and she had worked at Riverside Memorial for 22 years. She had seen countless patients come and go. She had witnessed joy and tragedy in equal measure. She had become, in some ways, numb to it all. That was how you survived in this job. You built walls around your heart so the pain could not get in. But Marcus's music went right through those walls. Janet felt tears forming in her eyes, and she did not wipe them away. A doctor came through the automatic doors of the main entrance. Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to Marcus, had just finished a 14-hour shift. He was exhausted, running on coffee and willpower. He had lost a patient today, an elderly woman who reminded him of his own mother. He felt defeated and wondered, not for the first time, if he was making any difference at all. He was reaching for his phone to call an Uber when he heard the violin. He stopped walking. He stopped thinking about his failed attempts to save his patient. For just a moment, the music made him remember why he had become a doctor in the first place: to ease suffering, to bring comfort, to be present in people's darkest hours. More people appeared. An elderly man in a wheelchair, pushed by a young woman who might have been his granddaughter, came through the doors. They paused at the entrance. The old man raised one shaky hand, signaling the woman to wait. He wanted to listen. A maintenance worker in green coveralls stopped mopping the floor just inside the glass doors. He leaned on his mop and watched Marcus through the window. A woman who had been crying in her car in the parking lot rolled down her window. The music drifted in, and somehow it made her tears feel less heavy. Inside the hospital, on various floors, people heard the music too. Windows began to open. A patient on the third floor, recovering from surgery, asked his wife to help him to the window. He could not see who was playing, but he could hear it clearly. The sound made him think of his childhood in Mexico, where street musicians played on every corner. It reminded him that life existed beyond these hospital walls, beyond pain and medication and worry. On the fifth floor, a woman in labor paused between contractions to listen. The music seemed to sync with her breathing, helping her find a rhythm. On the seventh floor, a young man who had been in a motorcycle accident opened his eyes for the first time in 2 days. The doctors could not explain it. Sometimes, they would later say, healing happens in mysterious ways. Back on the ground level, Gerald, the security guard, stood very still. His arms were no longer crossed. They hung at his sides. He was staring at Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. Gerald had worked at Riverside Memorial for 15 years. He had seen hundreds, maybe thousands of street performers try to play outside the hospital. Most of them were terrible. They were people with no real talent, just trying to make quick money from emotional visitors. Gerald had no patience for them. He enforced the rules strictly and sent them all away without a second thought. But this was different. Marcus was not like those other performers. Gerald could hear the difference. This man was a real musician. More than that, he was an artist. Every note he played carried weight and meaning. Gerald thought about his own daughter, Christina, who was 23 now and living across the country. When she was little, she had taken violin lessons for 3 years. She had not been very good, and eventually she quit. But Gerald remembered going to her recitals, watching her stand on stage in a pretty dress, carefully moving the bow across the strings. He remembered feeling proud of her even when she hit wrong notes. Those had been good years before the divorce, before Christina had grown up and moved away, before life had gotten so complicated. The music Marcus was playing now reminded Gerald of something he had forgotten. It reminded him that beauty existed, that grace existed, that moments of transcendence were possible even in ordinary places like hospital parking lots. Gerald felt something shift inside his chest. It was uncomfortable, like a knot being untied. He realized he had spent so many years enforcing rules that he had forgotten why the rules existed in the first place. Rules were supposed to protect people, to create order, to help things run smoothly. But sometimes, maybe, rules needed to step aside for something more important. David Morrison, Emma's father, stood behind his daughter with his hands on her small shoulders. He could feel her swaying gently to the music. David's eyes were closed, but tears were streaming down his face. He did not try to hide them or wipe them away. He just let them fall. The past 3 weeks had been the worst of David's life. When Emma had first complained of being tired all the time, he had thought it was just a growth spurt. Kids got tired. It was normal. But then she started bruising easily. She lost her appetite. She got a fever that would not go away. The doctor visits and blood tests had led to the diagnosis that shattered David's world. Leukemia. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, to be specific. The oncologist had used a lot of big words and shown them charts and statistics. The bottom line was simple and terrible. His little girl was very sick. She would need aggressive chemotherapy. Even with treatment, there were no guarantees. David's wife, Maria, had died 4 years ago in a car accident. Since then, it had been just David and Emma against the world. He had been both mother and father to her, working 2 jobs to keep them afloat, helping with homework, braiding her hair even though he was terrible at it, attending every school play and soccer game. Emma was his entire world. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Some nights after she fell asleep in her hospital bed, David would go to the bathroom and sob into a towel so she would not hear him. But right now, listening to this stranger's violin, David felt something he had not felt in weeks. Peace. Just for these few minutes. He was not a terrified father watching his child fight for her life. He was not a man crushed by medical bills and fear of the future. He was just a human being experiencing something beautiful. The music was giving him permission to feel something other than fear. It was reminding him that joy still existed somewhere in the world, even if he could not reach it right now. Emma stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, a small smile on her pale face. She looked peaceful in a way David had not seen since before the diagnosis. The chemotherapy made her feel awful most of the time. She was nauseous and weak and scared, though she tried to be brave for her daddy. But right now, with the music flowing around her, she forgot about all of that. She felt like she was floating. She imagined her grandmother was there with her, the way she used to be before the heart attack took her away. Grandma Rosa had played violin in church every Sunday. She had let Emma sit beside her and watch her fingers fly across the strings after she died. "Well, you should come back," Janet said. "Our patients could really benefit from hearing you play. Music is medicine too, you know. We forget that sometimes in a place like this, we focus on drugs and procedures and forget about the healing power of art." Marcus did not know what to say to that. The idea of playing regularly at a hospital had never occurred to him. He was just trying to make enough money to survive day to day. Before he could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "I completely agree." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was a woman in a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck. She was in her 50s with short gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag identified her as Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, Director of Pediatric Oncology. "I'm sorry to intrude," Dr. Okonkwo said, "but I heard the music from my office on the 6th floor. I had to come down and see who was playing." She looked at Emma and smiled. "And I see one of my patients is out of bed for the first time in days." "That's wonderful, Emma." Emma smiled shyly. "I heard the music from my room, Dr. Sarah. I had to come listen." "I'm glad you did," Dr. Okonkwo said. Then she turned to Marcus. "I meant what I said. Music has real therapeutic value, especially for children dealing with serious illness. We have studies that prove it. It reduces anxiety, lowers pain perception, improves mood. But more than that, it reminds them that life has beauty and joy to offer. That's powerful medicine." Marcus was taken aback by this. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "I just play because it's what I know how to do. Would you consider coming back?" Dr. Okonkwo asked directly. "Not just randomly, but on a regular schedule? We could arrange something formal. I can't offer much payment, but I can offer you something perhaps more valuable. Purpose. A chance to use your gift to truly help people." Marcus looked down at his violin. Then he looked at Emma, who was watching him with hopeful eyes. Then he looked at David, at Gerald, at Janet, at all the faces around him. These people were strangers, but somehow in this moment they felt like family. They had shared something meaningful together. That was rare in life, and Marcus knew it. "I would like that," Marcus heard himself say. "Yes, I would really like that." Emma clapped her hands together again. "Really? You'll come back?" "I promise," Marcus said, and he meant it. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. "Wonderful. Give me your contact information before you leave. We'll work out the details." As the group continued to talk, none of them noticed that someone had been recording the entire scene. A young man in scrubs, standing near the entrance, had pulled out his phone when the music started. He had captured Marcus's performance and the crowd's reaction and Emma's joy. Now, as everyone talked and laughed and made plans, the young man was already uploading the video to social media. He added a simple caption: "The Serenade that stopped a hospital." Within minutes, the video began to spread. Friends shared it with friends. Strangers shared it with strangers. It traveled across the city, then across the state, then across the country. People watched it on their phones during their commutes. They watched it at their desks during lunch breaks. They watched it before bed, and it made them feel something they could not quite name. Hope, maybe, or faith in humanity, or just the simple recognition that beauty still existed in a world that often seemed dark. But Marcus knew nothing about any of this yet. He was still standing in the hospital parking lot, talking with Dr. Okonkwo about schedules and logistics. He was watching Emma lean against her father, tired but happy. He was shaking hands with Gerald, who no longer looked stern but almost friendly. He was accepting thanks from nurses and doctors and strangers who had stopped to listen. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Marcus walked home that evening with his violin case feeling lighter than it had in years. Not physically lighter, of course. The instrument weighed the same as it always did, but something had changed inside him, and that made everything feel different. The streets were dark now, lit by street lamps that cast orange pools of light on the sidewalk. Cars passed by with their headlights cutting through the night. A few people walked past him, bundled in jackets against the cooling autumn air. None of them knew that something important had happened at Riverside Memorial Hospital just an hour ago. To them, this was just another Monday evening, but for Marcus, everything had shifted. He kept thinking about Emma's face when she listened to his music. He kept thinking about the applause that had rained down from the hospital windows. He kept thinking about Dr. Okonkwo's words. Purpose. A chance to use your gift to truly help people. Those words echoed in his mind as he walked the 15 blocks to his apartment building. Marcus lived in a neighborhood that real. Estate agents called up and coming, which really meant it was run down but might get better someday. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that badly needed repairs. The paint on the walls was peeling. The stairs creaked under his feet. The hallway smelled like old cooking and something else he had never quite identified. But the rent was cheap, and that was all that mattered to Marcus these days. He unlocked his door and stepped inside. The apartment was tiny. One main room that served as living room, dining room, and bedroom all in one. A closet-sized kitchen with a stove that only 2 of the 4 burners worked. A bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was his, and he was grateful for it. He had friends from the orchestra days who had lost everything when they lost their jobs. At least Marcus still had a roof over his head. He set his violin case down carefully on the small table that served as both his dining table and his desk. Then he went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Inside was not much. Some eggs that were probably still good. Half a loaf of bread. A container of leftover rice from 3 days ago that might be questionable. An apple that was starting to get soft. Marcus grabbed the apple and took a bite. It was mealy and not very sweet, but it was food. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. From his 3rd floor view, he could see other apartment buildings, a convenience store with a neon sign that flickered, a bus stop where a few people waited. This was his life, small and simple, and nothing like the grand dreams he had once held. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Marcus did not feel sorry for himself. Something had happened at the hospital. Something meaningful. He had made a real difference in someone's life, even if it was just for a few minutes. Marcus thought about his conversation with Dr. Okonkwo before he left the hospital. She had given him her business card and asked him to email her his schedule. They would work out times when he could come play for the pediatric oncology patients. Some might be in their rooms, too sick to come down. Others might be able to gather in a common area. The details would need to be figured out, but the important thing was the commitment. Marcus had agreed to come back. He had made a promise. He finished the apple and threw the core in the trash. Then he walked to his violin case and opened it. The instrument lay there, old and beautiful, full of stories and memories. Marcus ran his finger along the smooth wood. This violin had been with him through everything. Through his childhood lessons when his fingers were too small to reach the notes properly. Through his teenage years when he practiced until his arms ached. Through music school and his audition for the orchestra and every performance after that. Through his mother's illness and death. Through the loss of his job and these 3 hard years on the streets. The violin had never let him down. It had always been there, ready to sing whenever he asked it to. Marcus decided to practice for a while. Even though it was late and his neighbors might complain, he needed to play. He needed to process everything that had happened today through the only language he truly understood. Music. He warmed up with scales and arpeggios, basic exercises that every violinist knew by heart. His fingers moved up and down the strings, finding each note precisely. His bow arm moved smoothly, evenly, creating clean tones. After about 15 minutes of warm-up, Marcus started working on a piece he had not played in years. It was Salut d'Amour by Edward Elgar, a sweet and tender melody that his mother had loved. She had asked him to play it at her wedding anniversary party, back when his father was still alive. That had been more than 10 years ago now. Both of his parents were gone. But the music remained. As Marcus played Salut d'Amour in his tiny apartment, he thought about how strange life was, how full of unexpected turns and surprises. 3 years ago, if someone had told him he would be living in this small apartment, playing violin on street corners to survive, he would not have believed them. He had been so sure of his path. Orchestra violinist, steady job, comfortable life. That had been the plan. But life did not care about plans. Life did what it wanted, and people just had to adapt. Marcus had spent these past 3 years feeling like a failure. Every day he stood on street corners, he felt shame. He saw his old colleagues from the orchestra sometimes, walking past him in nice clothes on their way to concerts or rehearsals. They never stopped to talk. Maybe they did not recognize him. Maybe they were embarrassed for him. Maybe they were afraid that what happened to him could happen to them too. Marcus did not blame them. He would probably have done the same thing if their positions were reversed. But tonight something had cracked open inside him. Playing for Emma, seeing the joy on her face, hearing the applause from the hospital windows, talking with Dr. Okonkwo about coming back regularly. All of it had shown Marcus something important. He had been measuring his worth by the wrong standard. He had thought that success meant playing in a prestigious orchestra, wearing a tuxedo, performing on big stages. But maybe success was simpler than that. Maybe success was touching one person's heart. Maybe success was making a sick child smile. Maybe success was bringing a moment of peace to people who desperately needed it. Marcus finished playing Salut d'Amour and stood in the silence of his apartment for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. He had not checked it since before going to the hospital. The screen lit up, showing several notifications. Text messages from numbers he did not recognize. Emails from strangers. A dozen missed calls. Marcus frowned, confused. What was happening? He opened his text messages first. The first one was from someone named Jennifer. I saw your video. Your music is beautiful. Thank you for what you do. Video? What video? The next message was from someone called Robert. Just watched you playing at the hospital. Made me cry. You're an inspiration. Marcus's confusion grew. He had no idea what these people were talking about. He scrolled through more messages, all of them similar. People thanking him. People saying they had seen him playing. People telling him they were moved by his music. Then he opened his email. The first one was from his old friend Tony, a cellist he had played with in the orchestra. Marcus, I just saw you online. Man, that was incredible. I had no idea you were going through hard times. Call me. Let's talk. Another email from his aunt in California. Your music brought tears to my eyes. I'm so proud of you. Why didn't you tell us you needed help? More emails from strangers. More messages of support and praise and gratitude. Marcus sat down on his bed, his phone in his hand, trying to understand. Finally, he opened his social media. There on his feed was a video that had been shared thousands of times. The caption read, "The Serenade that stopped a hospital." Marcus clicked on the video with shaking hands. And there he was, standing outside Riverside Memorial Hospital playing his violin. The video showed Emma watching him with her eyes closed and that peaceful smile on her face. It showed David with tears streaming down his face. It showed Gerald standing with his arms at his sides, transformed from stern security guard to touched observer. It showed the windows opening above and people leaning out to listen. It showed the applause starting and spreading. It showed Marcus hugging Emma at the end. The video had been viewed more than 200,000 times. The comments section was full of people sharing their reactions. Marcus scrolled through them, his eyes getting wider with each one. This is the most beautiful thing I've seen all year. I'm literally sobbing at my desk right now. That little girl's face. We need more people like this in the world. Using their gifts to help others. I lost my daughter to cancer 5 years ago. This video brought back so many memories. Music was one of the few things that helped her during treatment. Thank you for doing this. Who is this guy? Does he have a website? I want to support his work. Marcus could not believe what he was seeing. Someone had filmed him. Someone had posted the video online, and now hundreds of thousands of people had watched it. Maybe millions by now. He refreshed the page. The view count had jumped to 300,000 in just the few minutes he had been looking at it. His phone rang. Marcus looked at the screen. It was a number he did not recognize. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Is this Marcus Chen?" A woman's voice, professional and friendly. "Yes, this is Marcus. My name is Amanda Reeves. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I'm calling about the video of you playing violin outside Riverside Memorial Hospital. We'd love to interview you for our evening news tomorrow. Would you be interested?" Marcus was stunned. I don't know. I wasn't expecting any of this." "The video has gone viral," Amanda explained. "People are connecting with your story. A talented musician who lost his job but continues to share his gift with others. A sick child finding joy in music. It's a beautiful human interest story. We'd really like to feature you. Can I think about it?" Marcus asked. "Of course. I'll send you an email with more details. But I should mention, you're getting a lot of media attention right now. We're not the only ones calling. If you want to control your narrative, it might be good to do an interview with someone you trust." After the call ended, Marcus just sat there, his mind racing. More calls came in. More texts. More emails. Everyone wanted to talk to him. Everyone wanted to know his story. Everyone wanted to help him somehow. Around midnight, completely overwhelmed, Marcus turned off his phone. He needed silence. He needed to think. He went to his window again and looked out at the dark city. Somewhere out there, Emma was back in her hospital bed, hopefully sleeping peacefully. David was probably in the chair beside her, keeping watch like he did every night. Gerald was maybe finishing his security shift, checking locks and walking empty hallways. Dr. Okonkwo was perhaps in her office, working late on treatment plans for her young patients. Janet, the nurse, was maybe at home, thinking about what she had witnessed. All these people had been part of this moment. All these lives had intersected for one brief, shining instant. And somehow, that moment had been captured and shared with the world. Marcus did not know what would happen next. He did not know if this viral video would change anything in his life. But he knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow he would call Dr. Okonkwo. He would set up a schedule to play at the hospital regularly. He would keep his promise to Emma. Whatever else happened, that was what mattered. Marcus finally went to bed around 1 in the morning. He lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. Sirens in the distance, a car alarm going off, someone shouting on the street, the usual symphony of urban life. But underneath all that noise, Marcus could still hear the music he had played that evening. He could still see Emma's face. He could still feel the weight of the moment when everything had changed. Sleep did not come easily. His mind was too active, too full of thoughts and questions and possibilities. But eventually, exhaustion won. Marcus drifted off with his hand resting on his chest right over his heart, as if he were trying to hold on to the feeling of purpose that had bloomed there earlier that evening. When he woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through his window. Marcus sat up and reached for his phone. He turned it back on and watched as notifications flooded in. Hundreds of new messages, dozens of missed calls. The video had been viewed over 2 million times now. Marcus scrolled through the messages until he found one that caught his attention. It was from an organization called the Arts Healing Foundation. They funded music therapy programs in hospitals around the country. They wanted to talk to Marcus about supporting his work. They mentioned grants and resources and professional development. Another message was from the Central Valley Orchestra, his former employer. The managing director wanted to discuss potential opportunities. Could Marcus come in for a meeting? There was even a message from a recording company that wanted to know if Marcus had ever considered making an album. Marcus stood up and walked to his violin case. He opened it and looked at his grandfather's old instrument. "What do you think?" he asked the violin as if it could answer. "Should we see where this goes?" The violin, of course, said nothing. But Marcus felt like he knew what his grandfather would say if he were still alive. Music is meant to be shared. Music is meant to heal. Music is meant to connect people. So yes, see where it goes. Say yes to the opportunities. Take the risk. Marcus picked up his phone and started replying to messages. He said yes to the news interview. He said yes to a meeting with the Arts Healing Foundation. He said yes to discussing opportunities with his old orchestra. He said yes to keeping his promise to play at the hospital. But first, before anything else, he sent a message to Dr. Okonkwo. "Good morning. This is Marcus Chen, the violinist from yesterday evening. I'd like to schedule times to come play for your patients. When would work best for you?" The response came back within 5 minutes. "How about tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock? I'll arrange for some of our patients to gather in the recreation room. Those who can't leave their beds will use the speaker system to broadcast to their rooms. Thank you for doing this, Marcus. It means more than you know." Marcus smiled and confirmed the time. Then he made himself breakfast, which consisted of scrambled eggs and toast, the best meal he could make with what he had in his small kitchen. As he ate, he thought about Emma. He wondered how she was feeling this morning. He wondered if she had dreamed about the music. He wondered if hearing him play had given her strength to face another day of difficult treatment. He also thought about all the other Emmas out there. All the sick children in all the hospitals everywhere, all the scared parents sitting beside their beds, all the doctors and nurses working so hard to heal them. And he thought about how music, his music, could be a small light in their darkness. It would not cure diseases. It would not take away pain. But it could remind people that beauty existed, that hope existed, that they were not alone in their struggle. Marcus finished his breakfast and washed his dishes. Then he sat down at his table with his laptop and started planning. If he was going to do this right, if he was going to truly serve these children and their families, he needed to prepare. He needed to build a repertoire of songs that would work in a hospital setting, soothing pieces for anxious patients, uplifting pieces for those who needed encouragement, familiar pieces that might spark happy memories, playful pieces for the younger children. He spent the entire morning researching music therapy techniques. He read studies about how music affected the brain, how it reduced stress hormones, how it activated pleasure centers and created emotional connections. He watched videos of other musicians who worked in hospitals. He took notes and made lists and planned what he would play tomorrow. Around noon, there was a knock on his door. Marcus was not expecting anyone. He walked to the door cautiously and looked through the peephole. A delivery person stood there holding a large package. Marcus opened the door. "Can I help you?" "Delivery for Marcus Chen," the person said. "That's me." The delivery person handed over the package and a clipboard. "Sign here, please." Marcus signed and took the package inside. It was surprisingly heavy. He set it on his table and looked for a return address. It was from someone named Patricia Lee in Oregon. Marcus did not know anyone by that name. He carefully opened the package. Inside was a note on top of layers of bubble wrap. Marcus unfolded the note and read, "Dear Marcus, I watched your video playing for that little girl outside the hospital. It touched my heart deeply. My husband was a violinist. He passed away 2 years ago from cancer. Among his possessions was a beautiful violin case, much nicer than the one I saw you carrying in the video. I'd like you to have it. It's made of carbon fiber, very light and durable, with excellent protection for your instrument. My husband would have loved knowing it went to someone who uses music to heal others. Thank you for what you do. With gratitude, Patricia Lee." Marcus carefully unwrapped the layers of bubble wrap. Inside was indeed a violin case, and it was beautiful. Sleek black carbon fiber with a soft blue lining inside. It had compartments for extra strings and rosin and other accessories. It had backpack straps so it could be carried hands-free. It probably cost several $100s, maybe more. Marcus sat down heavily. His eyes filled with tears. He had never met Patricia Lee. He did not know her or her late husband, but she had sent him this gift because she believed in what he was doing, because his music had meant something to her. This was the power of the viral video, Marcus realized. Not the attention or the fame or the media interest. This, people connecting, people being generous, people supporting each other across distances and differences. The video had created a bridge between his small life and thousands of other lives, and that connection was beautiful. Marcus spent the afternoon continuing to receive messages and calls. He did the interview with Channel 7 News, sitting in his small apartment and talking about his journey from orchestra violinist to street performer to whatever he was becoming now. The reporter Amanda was kind and asked good questions. She seemed genuinely interested in his story, not just looking for a quick viral piece. That evening, as the sun set, Marcus made a decision. He walked to his closet and pulled out the garment bag that held his old tuxedo. He unzipped it slowly. The tuxedo looked back at him, formal and familiar. a reminder of who he used to be. Marcus ran his hand over the fabric. Then he zipped the bag back up and hung it back in the closet. Marcus arrived at Riverside Memorial Hospital at 1:30 in the afternoon, 30 minutes before his scheduled time. He wanted to be early, to have time to prepare himself mentally and emotionally. He carried his new carbon fiber violin case on his back like a backpack, and it felt both strange and wonderful. The case was so much lighter than his old one. His shoulders did not ache from the weight. He could walk more easily, more confidently. As he approached the main entrance, Marcus saw Gerald standing at his usual post. The security guard's face broke into a smile when he recognized Marcus. This was a different Gerald from the stern man who had almost sent him away 2 nights ago. "Marcus," Gerald called out. "Good to see you. Dr. Okonkwo told me you'd be coming. She's waiting for you inside." "Thanks, Gerald," Marcus said, returning the smile. "How have you been?" "Can't complain," Gerald replied. He paused, then added, "I watched that video, you know. My daughter called me last night from Seattle. She saw it too. She said she was proud of me for letting you play. I don't think she said she was proud of me in about 5 years." His voice caught slightly on the last sentence. Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. "That's wonderful, Gerald. Really wonderful." "Yeah, well," Gerald cleared his throat, embarrassed by his own emotion. "Anyway, you better get inside. Dr. Okonkwo is excited about this whole thing." Marcus walked through the automatic doors and into the hospital lobby. The smell hit him immediately. Hospitals had a specific smell, a mixture of cleaning products and medicine and something else he could never quite identify. It was not a bad smell exactly, just a hospital smell. It brought back memories of sitting with his mother, of long days and longer nights in rooms that all looked the same. But today felt different. Today he was not here as a grieving son watching his mother die. He was here as a musician with a purpose. He was here to give something instead of helplessly watching something be taken away. "Marcus," a voice called out. He turned to see Dr. Okonkwo walking toward him, her white coat flapping slightly as she moved. She was smiling broadly. "I'm so glad you're here." "Are you ready?" "I think so," Marcus said, though his stomach was full of nervous butterflies. "Where will I be playing?" "Follow me," Dr. Okonkwo said. "We have a recreation room on the pediatric floor. It's not huge, but it has space for about 30 people. I've invited families who have children here for treatment. Some of them have been here for weeks. Some just arrived today. They all need something hopeful to focus on." They walked to the elevators and rode up to the 4th floor. As the doors opened, Marcus heard the sounds of a children's hospital wing. Beeping machines. Quiet conversations. A child crying somewhere down a hallway. A television playing cartoons. Nurses moving efficiently from room to room. Dr. Okonkwo led Marcus down a corridor and through a set of double doors. On the other side was a large room painted in bright, cheerful colors. Yellow walls with painted clouds and rainbows. Blue carpet decorated with stars and moons. Child-sized tables and chairs scattered around. Bookshelves full of games and puzzles. A television in one corner. Large windows that let in natural light. And people. So many people. Marcus stopped in the doorway, surprised by the crowd. There had to be at least 40 people in the room, maybe more. Children of all ages. Some in wheelchairs, some connected to IV poles. Some with bandanas covering their bald heads from chemotherapy. Parents standing behind them, sitting beside them, holding their hands. Nurses positioned around the room, ready to help if needed. Everyone turned to look at Marcus when he entered. The room fell silent. All these eyes on him. Marcus felt his nervousness spike. When he played on street corners, people mostly ignored him. They walked past without really seeing him. This was different. These people were here specifically to hear him play. They were waiting, expecting, hoping. "Everyone," Dr. Okonkwo announced. "This is Marcus Chen. He's a professional violinist who has graciously agreed to play for us today." There was polite applause. Marcus waved awkwardly, then moved to the front of the room where a chair had been set up for him. He carefully took off his backpack case and set it down. As he opened it and removed his violin, he scanned the crowd looking for one particular face. There, in the front row, Emma. She was sitting in a wheelchair today, looking tired but alert. Her father, David, stood behind her with his hands on the wheelchair handles. When Emma saw Marcus looking at her, her face lit up with joy. She waved enthusiastically. Marcus waved back, feeling some of his nervousness fade. He was here for her, for all of them. He could do this. "Hi, everyone," Marcus said, his voice a little shaky. "Thank you for coming. I'm not very good at talking, but I'm pretty good at playing violin, so I'll do more of that and less of this." A few people laughed. Marcus felt himself relax a tiny bit more. He sat down in the chair and positioned his violin. He took a moment to tune, even though the instrument was already perfectly in tune. It was a ritual, a way to settle his mind and prepare himself. The room was silent as he made tiny adjustments to each string. Then Marcus looked up at the faces watching him. Children with hope in their eyes despite their circumstances. Parents with exhaustion and fear written in every line of their faces. Nurses who had seen too much suffering but kept showing up anyway. These were warriors, every single one of them. They were fighting battles most people could not imagine. And Marcus was here to give them a few minutes of beauty, a brief escape from pain and worry. He closed his eyes and began to play. The first piece Marcus chose was Morning Mood from Peer Gynt by Edvard Grieg. It was gentle and hopeful, like the sun rising over mountains. The melody started soft and slowly built, creating a sense of peace and possibility. Marcus played it carefully, tenderly, letting each note ring clear and true. As he played, he could feel the energy in the room shift. The tension that had filled the space when he walked in began to dissipate. Bodies relaxed. Breathing slowed. People stopped fidgeting and simply listened. Marcus kept his eyes closed for most of the piece, but occasionally he opened them briefly to check on his audience. What he saw made his heart swell. Emma had closed her eyes and was swaying gently in her wheelchair. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, was lying on the carpet with his head in his mother's lap, completely still. A teenage girl with a bandana covering her bald head had tears running down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Parents held their children close. Nurses had paused in their duties to listen. The first piece ended with a soft, gentle resolution. There was a moment of silence and then applause filled the room. But it was different from the applause at a concert hall. This applause was grateful, emotional, coming from people who needed this music in ways that audience members in tuxedos could never understand. "That was beautiful," someone called out. "Play more," a child's voice said. Marcus smiled and nodded. "I will. I have lots more music for you." The second piece was Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy, arranged for solo violin. This one was dreamy and floating like moonlight on water. It was the kind of music that transported listeners somewhere else, somewhere peaceful and safe. As Marcus played, he noticed several children closing their eyes, their faces relaxing into expressions of peace. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, raised his hand in the middle of the piece. Marcus kept playing but opened his eyes and nodded at the boy. "Can you play something happy?" the boy asked. "Something that makes you want to dance?" Marcus finished the phrase he was playing and smiled. "Absolutely. I know just the thing." The third piece was a complete change of pace. Marcus launched into Czardas by Vittorio Monti, a Hungarian dance full of energy and fire. His bow flew across the strings. His fingers danced up and down the neck of the violin. The music was fast, exciting, full of life and joy. The effect on the room was immediate and dramatic. Children who had been sitting still started moving. Some clapped their hands. Others bounced in their seats or wheelchairs. The 5-year-old boy jumped up and started spinning in circles, his IV pole rolling along beside him on its wheels. His mother laughed and let him dance, tears streaming down her face at the sight of her sick son having such pure joy. Other children joined in, moving however they could. Some could only sway in their chairs. Some tapped their feet or nodded their heads. But everyone was responding to the music, letting it lift their spirits and remind them that life had room for celebration, even in dark times. Marcus played with more energy than he had played with in years. He was not performing for an audience of wealthy patrons in a concert hall. He was not playing to impress critics or judges. He was playing for children who needed to remember how to smile. And that made him play with everything he had. When the piece ended with a flourish, the applause was thunderous. Children cheered. Parents stood up clapping. Even the nurses joined in enthusiastically. Marcus stood and took a bow, his face flushed with exertion and joy. "More! More! More!" the children chanted. Marcus laughed. Okay. But let me take a quick break for water. My arms are tired. Dr. Okonkwo appeared with a bottle of water. Marcus drank gratefully while the children talked excitedly among themselves. He noticed Emma was whispering something to her father. David nodded and pushed her wheelchair closer to Marcus. "Marcus," Emma said shyly. He began to play Blackbird by the Beatles. It was a simple, hopeful song about finding freedom after darkness. The melody was gentle but determined. The message was perfect for this room full of fighters. As Marcus played, he thought about each child here. Each one was a blackbird learning to fly despite broken wings. Each one was singing in the dead of night, finding their voice despite pain and fear. When the final note faded away, there was silence for several long seconds. Then the applause began again, but softer this time, more reverent. Several parents were openly crying. Children who had enough energy clapped enthusiastically. Those who were too tired smiled or gave thumbs up. Marcus stood and bowed deeply. "Thank you all for listening," he said. "You made this so special for me. I hope to come back and play for you again very soon. Promise?" A little girl called out. "I promise," Marcus said. As families began to leave, many stopped to thank Marcus personally. Parents shook his hand with tears in their eyes. Children hugged his legs or showed him drawings they had made while he played. Nurses told him how much this had meant to everyone. One mother, a woman in her 40s with gray roots showing in her dark hair, took both of Marcus's hands in hers. "My son has been here for 6 weeks," she said. "He has been so depressed. He barely talks anymore. But today while you played, he danced. He actually danced. I haven't seen him smile like that in over a month. Thank you. Thank you so much." Marcus did not know what to say to that. "I'm just glad I could help," he managed. After everyone else had left, Dr. Okonkwo returned to the recreation room. Marcus was packing up his violin, feeling exhausted but fulfilled. "That was extraordinary," Dr. Okonkwo said. "I've worked in pediatric oncology for 23 years. I've seen a lot of interventions and therapies, but I've never seen anything transform a room like your music did today. Those kids are amazing," Marcus said. "So brave, so full of life despite everything they're going through." "They are," Dr. Okonkwo agreed. "But they need help staying brave. They need reasons to keep fighting. Your music gives them that." She paused, then pulled an envelope from her coat pocket. "This is for you." Marcus took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a check for $500. "I can't accept this," Marcus said immediately. "I didn't do this for money." "I know you didn't," Dr. Okonkwo said. "But several families approached me after you played. They wanted to contribute something. They know you're struggling. They wanted to help. This is their way of saying thank you." Marcus looked at the check again. $500. That was more than he usually made in 2 weeks of playing on street corners. "Tell them thank you," he said quietly. "And tell them I'll be back, as often as you want me. How about every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon?" Dr. Okonkwo suggested. 2 o'clock just like today? "I'll be here," Marcus promised. As Marcus left the hospital that day, walking through the lobby with his violin case on his back, he felt like a different person than the one who had arrived. Something had shifted inside him. He had found his purpose again, not playing for money or prestige or acclaim, playing to heal, playing to help, playing to remind people that beauty existed even in the darkest places. Gerald waved to him from his post at the entrance. "See you Tuesday, Marcus." "See you Tuesday, Gerald." Marcus stepped out into the afternoon sunshine. The city sprawled before him, busy and indifferent as always. Cars honked. People rushed past. The world kept turning. But Marcus felt grounded now, connected to something larger than himself. He thought about Emma's question. "Can you teach me to play someday? When I get better?" Not if when. That was faith. That was hope. That was the same spirit Marcus needed to carry forward in his own life. Not dwelling on what he had lost, but focusing on what he could create. Not mourning the past, but building a new future. Marcus started walking home, but before he got far, his phone rang. He pulled it out and saw an unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Mr. Chen? This is Richard Yamamoto. I'm the conductor of the Central Valley Orchestra." Marcus stopped walking. Richard Yamamoto. His former boss, the man who had been forced to lay him off 3 years ago. "Hello, Mr. Yamamoto," Marcus said carefully. "Please call me Richard. Listen, I saw the video of you playing outside the hospital, and I saw the news piece that aired last night. Marcus, I had no idea you had been struggling like this. I felt terrible. It's not your fault, Marcus said. Budget cuts happen. They do, Richard agreed. But I should have checked on you afterward. I should have helped you find other opportunities. I didn't, and I'm sorry. He paused. Marcus, I'd like to talk with you about coming back to the orchestra. We have an opening for assistant concertmaster. The salary is better than what you were making before. Would you be interested in discussing it? Marcus stood on the sidewalk, people flowing around him like water around a stone. The orchestra. His old life. The thing he had dreamed about for 3 years was suddenly being offered to him. He should feel excited. He should feel grateful. But what he actually felt was complicated. Can I think about it? Marcus asked. Richard sounded surprised. Of course. Take your time. Call me when you're ready to talk. After they hung up, Marcus continued walking home. His mind was spinning. The orchestra wanted him back. That was what he had wanted for so long. Steady income, prestige, the chance to play with other professional musicians again, the chance to wear that tuxedo hanging in his closet. Everything going back to normal. But was that what he wanted now? Marcus thought about the faces in the hospital recreation room. He thought about Emma's joy. He thought about the mother whose son had danced for the first time in weeks. He thought about how playing for them had made him feel more alive, more purposeful, more needed than he had felt in years. Could he do both? Play with the orchestra and keep his promise to the children at the hospital? Maybe. But orchestra rehearsals and performances would take up many hours. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons might become impossible. He would have to choose. Marcus arrived at his apartment building still deep in thought. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs and let himself into his small home. He set his violin case down carefully and went to make tea. As the water heated, he stared out his window at the city below. His phone buzzed. A text message from Dr. Okonkwo. Several news outlets are asking if they can film you playing for the children on Tuesday. I wanted to check with you first. Are you comfortable with that? Marcus typed back. Let me think about it. I don't want the children to feel like they're being used for content. Understood. Take your time deciding. More messages came in throughout the evening. The Arts Healing Foundation wanted to set up a call to discuss grant funding. A music school in the city wanted to know if he would teach classes. A concert hall downtown offered him a solo performance slot. Everyone wanted a piece of him suddenly, when just a few days ago nobody had cared. Marcus made himself dinner, scrambled eggs again because that was what he had. As he ate, he thought about his grandfather, the man who had given him this violin. Grandfather Chen had been a simple man. He had worked in a factory during the day and played violin at his church on Sundays. He had never been famous or wealthy, but he had been happy. He had told young Marcus something important. Music is not about you, he had said. Music is about serving others. When you play for yourself, it's just noise. When you play for others, it becomes sacred. Marcus finished his eggs and washed his plate. Then he sat down with his laptop and opened his email. He found Richard Yamamoto's contact information and began to type. Dear Richard, thank you for your call today, and for the opportunity to return to the orchestra. 3 years ago, I would have done anything for this chance. But I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I've learned something important. I've learned that success isn't about where you play or how much you get paid. It's about why you play and who you play for. I have committed to playing twice a week for children fighting cancer. These kids need music in ways that concert audiences never will. I can't give that up, not even for the orchestra. If there's a way to do both, I'm open to discussing it. But if I have to choose, I choose the children. I hope you understand. With respect, Marcus. He read the email 3 times, then hit send before he could change his mind. Marcus felt lighter immediately. He had made his choice. He had chosen purpose over prestige. He had chosen service over salary. He had chosen the path his grandfather would have been proud of. His phone rang. It was Tony, his old friend from the orchestra, the cellist. Marcus, I can't believe you turned down Richard's offer. He just called me complaining about it. News travels fast, Marcus said. Are you crazy? Tony asked. But his tone was more curious than judgmental. This was your chance to get your career back. I'm getting my career back, Marcus said. Just not in the way I expected. Tony was quiet for a moment. Tell me about these hospital kids. What's that like? Marcus spent 20 minutes telling Tony about Emma, about the recreation room full of children, about how it felt to play music that truly mattered to people who desperately needed it. As he talked, he heard himself getting emotional. This was his calling. This was what he was meant to do. "Man," Tony said when Marcus finished. 3 months had passed since that first evening outside Riverside Memorial Hospital. 3 months since Marcus had played for Emma, and the music had brought a hospital to a standstill. 3 months since his life had changed completely. Now, standing in the same recreation room where he had played his first hospital concert, Marcus could barely recognize his own life. The room was packed today, not just with children and parents, but with other musicians too. Tony sat beside Marcus, his cello resting between his knees. Sarah Kim, a flutist Marcus had known from his orchestra days, was warming up near the window. James Patterson, a young guitarist who had reached out to Marcus through social media, was tuning his instrument in the corner. And in the back of the room, setting up recording equipment, was a documentary crew from PBS who were filming a series about healing through music. But despite all these changes, some things remained the same. Emma still sat in the front row, though today she was not in a wheelchair. She sat in a regular chair beside her father, and her color looked better. The chemotherapy was working. The cancer was in remission. She still had a long road ahead, but the doctors were optimistic. And wrapped in her arms was a small violin case, a gift from Marcus funded by donations that had poured in after his story went viral. Marcus looked around at all the faces watching him. There were the regular children he had come to know over the past 3 months. Tommy, the 5-year-old who always requested something he could dance to. Rachel, the teenager with leukemia, who had started writing poetry inspired by the music. Miguel, the 7-year-old who was scared of everything except violin music. And at least a dozen new faces, children who had just been admitted or transferred from other hospitals. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months, Marcus had been here. Sometimes he played alone. Sometimes other musicians joined him. But he was always here keeping his promise, and the effect on the children was measurable. Dr. Okonkwo had shown him data. Pain medication requests went down on the days he played. Anxiety levels decreased. Cooperation with medical procedures increased. The music was not just making children feel better emotionally. It was helping them heal physically too. But the impact had spread far beyond Riverside Memorial. The viral video had been viewed over 20 million times now. Marcus had been featured in newspapers and magazines. He had appeared on talk shows. He had given a TED Talk about finding purpose after loss. The Arts Healing Foundation had given him a grant to develop a formal music therapy program. 5 other hospitals in the region had invited him to play for their patients, and more than 50 musicians from around the country had contacted him, wanting to volunteer in similar programs in their own cities. Marcus had even released an album. A small record label had approached him about recording the pieces he played most often for the children. All the profits went to cancer research and music therapy programs. The album was called Music for Healing, and it had been surprisingly successful. Not because it was groundbreaking music, but because people connected with the story behind it. Every person who bought the album knew they were supporting something meaningful. Today was special, though. Today marked the 3-month anniversary of that first performance. Dr. Okonkwo had asked Marcus if they could do something bigger than usual. So he had brought together this group of musicians, and they were going to play not just for the children in the recreation room, but for the entire hospital. Speakers had been set up throughout the building so every patient, every family member, every doctor and nurse and janitor could hear the music if they wanted to. Marcus stood up and addressed the room. He was more comfortable speaking now, after 3 months of practice. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We have something special planned. My friends and I are going to play for all of you, and for everyone else in this hospital. We're going to fill this building with music, from the basement to the top floor, and we're going to remind everyone here that beauty exists, that hope is real, and that you are not alone in whatever fight you're fighting. The children clapped. Emma waved her hand excitedly at Marcus. He winked at her. But first, Marcus continued, I want to tell you about why I'm here. 3 months ago, I was lost. I had lost my job, my purpose, my reason for getting up in the morning. I was just going through the motions of life. And then I came to this hospital. I met a little girl named Emma, who asked me to play something that sounded like hope. And when I played for her, something inside me woke up. I remembered why I learned violin in the first place. Not to be famous or rich or admired, but to create beauty and share it with others. Emma gave me that gift. She saved my life just as much as the doctors here are saving hers." Emma's eyes filled with tears. David put his arm around his daughter's shoulders and pulled her close. "So today," Marcus said, "we play for Emma. We play for all of you. We play because music is magic. It can't cure diseases. It can't fix what's broken in our bodies. But it can heal our spirits. It can remind us why life is worth living, and sometimes that's the most important medicine of all." Marcus lifted his violin to his chin. Tony positioned his cello. Sarah raised her flute. James held his guitar ready. The documentary crew's cameras were rolling. Throughout the hospital, hundreds of people paused what they were doing, waiting to hear what would come through the speakers. Marcus looked at his fellow musicians and nodded. They began to play. The first piece was the original composition Marcus had written over the past month. He called it Emma's Song. It started with just his violin, soft and gentle like a whisper. Then Tony's cello joined in, adding depth and warmth. Sarah's flute floated above both of them, light and airy. James's guitar provided rhythm and harmony. The four instruments wove together, creating something that was more than the sum of its parts. The melody was simple, but profound. It told a story without words. The story of a child facing darkness but finding light. The story of fear transforming into courage. The story of weakness becoming strength. As Marcus played, he thought about all the children in this hospital. Each one fighting their own battle. Each one showing bravery that most adults could never imagine. Throughout the hospital, the music flowed from the speakers. In the intensive care unit, a baby in an incubator seemed to calm down, her vital signs stabilizing. In the surgical wing, a team of doctors operating on a patient found their movements becoming more fluid, more coordinated, working together in harmony. In the waiting room, families who had been sitting in anxious silence found themselves looking at each other, sharing small smiles of comfort. In the cafeteria, workers paused their cleaning and food preparation to listen. In the administrative offices, people stopped typing and simply breathed. Gerald, working his security post in the lobby, stood perfectly still. He had heard Marcus play many times over the past 3 months. Each time affected him deeply. He had started calling his daughter Christina more often. They were rebuilding their relationship, one conversation at a time. He had even told her about Marcus and the music and how it had changed his perspective on what mattered in life. Christina had told him she was proud of him. Those words had meant everything. In the recreation room, the children were transfixed. Tommy sat perfectly still for once, not fidgeting or asking questions. Rachel had pulled out her notebook and was writing furiously, capturing her emotions in poetry. Miguel held his mother's hand and smiled. Emma closed her eyes and swayed gently, the same way she had done 3 months ago when she first heard Marcus play. The piece built slowly, layer by layer, instrument by instrument, until it reached a crescendo that filled every corner of the hospital. Then, just as suddenly, it softened again. The instruments dropped away one by one until only Marcus's violin remained, playing the same gentle melody that had started the piece. It was cyclical, like life itself, beginning, growing, peaking, returning. It was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. When the final note faded into silence, the applause began. It started in the recreation room and spread throughout the hospital. People in their rooms clapped as best they could. Nurses and doctors in the hallways applauded. Even the documentary crew, who were supposed to remain professional and detached, set down their cameras briefly to join in. Marcus lowered his violin and looked at Emma. She was crying openly now, but smiling too. She mouthed 2 words to him. "Thank you." The musicians played for another hour. Classical pieces, folk songs, modern pop songs arranged for their ensemble, music from movies and musicals, songs that made children laugh and dance, songs that made parents cry with bittersweet emotion, songs that brought moments of transcendence to a place usually associated with pain and fear. During a brief break between pieces, Dr. Okonkwo came to the front of the room. She had an announcement. "Before we continue," she said, "I want to share some exciting news. Thanks to Marcus and the attention his work has brought to the power of music therapy, we have received a major donation. Starting next month, Riverside Memorial Hospital will have a permanent music therapy program. We're hiring 3 full-time music therapists. We're building a dedicated music room on every floor, and we're inviting musicians from the community to volunteer regularly, just as Marcus and his friends have done." "You know," she said, "when I saw that video 3 months ago, I had no idea it would lead to all this. I just thought it would be nice to have you play occasionally. But you've created something so much bigger. I didn't create it alone, Marcus said. Emma created it. You created it. Gerald created it. Everyone who helped that first evening created it. I just played the violin. You did more than that, Dr. Okonkwo said. You showed up. You kept your promise. You built something lasting. That takes commitment and vision and heart. That's why I wanted you as artistic director. This program needs someone who understands what it's really about. Marcus finished packing his violin in the beautiful carbon fiber case that Patricia Lee had sent him. He thought about that gift, about all the gifts he had received over these 3 months. Not just physical gifts like the case or the donations or the job offer, but deeper gifts. The gift of purpose. The gift of connection. The gift of knowing his life mattered. Can I tell you something? Marcus said to Dr. Okonkwo. 3 months ago, I was standing in that parking lot and Gerald was about to send me away. I was ready to pack up and leave. I was used to being told I didn't belong places. But then Emma came running out and everything changed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she hadn't heard me from her window. If she hadn't asked me to play, where would I be now? Probably standing on some street corner, still talented but unseen, Dr. Okonkwo said. But Emma did hear you. And you did play. And here we are. That's the thing about moments, Marcus. We never know which ones will change everything. We just have to show up and be ready when they arrive. Marcus nodded. She was right. He had shown up that evening 3 months ago, not expecting anything special. Just another day of playing for spare change. But he had been ready when the moment came. He had said yes to Emma's request. He had opened his heart to the possibility of something more. They walked together down the hallway toward the elevators. Through windows, Marcus could see the sun beginning to set. The city stretched out below, full of life and noise and endless activity. Somewhere out there, someone else was struggling. Someone else had lost their purpose. Someone else was just trying to survive another day. Marcus thought about these invisible people and he felt a connection to them. He had been there. He understood. The elevator doors opened. Inside stood Gerald, just finishing his shift. Marcus, Gerald said. Beautiful music today. My daughter watched the live stream. She called me right after. Said she cried through the whole thing. I'm glad she enjoyed it, Marcus said. She's coming to visit next month, Gerald continued, and Marcus could hear the emotion in his voice. First time in 2 years. We're going to have Thanksgiving together. I haven't spent Thanksgiving with her since the divorce. That's wonderful, Gerald, Marcus said, meaning it deeply. It's because of you, Gerald said. That first night when you played for Emma, something shifted in me. I realized I had been so focused on enforcing rules, on keeping order, that I had forgotten how to be human. How to be flexible, how to be kind. When I let you play that night, I was choosing compassion over regulation, and that felt good. That felt right. It reminded me who I used to be before life made me hard, so I called Christina and apologized for being absent, for being rigid, for not being the father she needed. And she forgave me. We're rebuilding now, because of you. Because of that music, Marcus did not know what to say. He had not known that his music had rippled out this far, had touched this many lives in this many different ways. The elevator reached the ground floor. The three of them walked together through the lobby toward the main entrance. The automatic doors slid open and they stepped outside into the cool evening air. This was the exact spot where Marcus had set up his violin case 3 months ago. The spot where Gerald had told him he could not play. The spot where Emma had come running. The spot where everything had changed. It's funny, Marcus said, looking at that spot. 3 months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. My career, my identity, my future. I was just going through the motions, waiting for something to change. And then it did, Dr. Okonkwo said. And then it did, Marcus agreed, but not in the way I expected. I didn't get my old life back. I got a new life, a better life, a life that actually means something. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the hospital behind them. Lights were coming on in windows as evening fell. Inside those rooms were patients fighting battles, families holding vigils, doctors and nurses working tirelessly to heal. And now woven through it all there would be music, regular, consistent healing music, because Marcus had said yes to a little girl's request, because he had chosen purpose over pride, because he had learned that success was not about status or salary, but about service. Well, Gerald said, breaking the silence. I better get home. Long day tomorrow. Me too, Dr. Okonkwo said. I have early rounds. They said their goodbyes and went their separate ways. Marcus stood alone for another moment, his violin case on his back, looking up at the hospital. He thought about Emma practicing her violin lessons next week. He thought about Tommy dancing to his music. He thought about Rachel writing poetry. He thought about all the children he had not met yet, the ones who would come to the hospital in the months and years ahead. They would all hear music now. They would all have that gift. Marcus started walking home, but he felt lighter than he ever had. His apartment was still small. His life was still simple, but it was full. Full of purpose, full of connection, full of meaning. And that made all the difference. His phone buzzed. A text from Tony. That was incredible today, man. When can we do it again? Marcus smiled and typed back. Tuesday, same time, same place, always. As he walked through the city streets, Marcus passed other people. A businessman talking loudly on his phone, a mother pushing a stroller, a teenager with headphones on, lost in music, a homeless man sitting against a building, holding a cardboard sign. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. He handed it to the homeless man without a word. God bless you, the man said. God bless you too, Marcus replied. He kept walking, thinking about how 3 months ago he could have been that man, how close he had come to losing everything. How one moment, one choice, one little girl's request had saved him from that fate. Life was fragile. Life was unpredictable. But life was also full of possibilities if you stayed open to them. Marcus arrived at his apartment building and climbed the 3 flights of stairs. He let himself into his home, which did not feel as small anymore. He set his violin case down gently on the table. Then he walked to the closet and pulled out the garment bag holding his old tuxedo. He unzipped it slowly and looked at the formal wear inside. He had not worn it in 3 years. He had thought he might never wear it again. But next month, Marcus was scheduled to perform a benefit concert at the city's main concert hall. All proceeds would go to the hospital's music therapy program. It was a real concert with ticket sales and an audience and everything. His return to the stage. Not with an orchestra, but as a soloist, playing the music he loved for a cause he believed in. Marcus ran his hand over the tuxedo fabric. Maybe it was time to wear it again. Not because he needed to prove anything to anyone. Not because he was going back to his old life, but because he was honoring music and honoring the people who would benefit from that concert. The tuxedo represented respect for the art form and respect for the audience. He zipped the garment bag back up and hung it in the closet. Next month. He would think about it next month. For now, Marcus made himself dinner. Real dinner this time, not just scrambled eggs. He had gone grocery shopping earlier in the week. He had money now. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to buy real food and pay his bills and save a little. Enough to stop worrying constantly about survival. As he cooked, Marcus thought about what he would play next Tuesday at the hospital. Maybe some Bach. The children loved Bach. Maybe some folk songs. Maybe he would let Emma try a few notes on her new violin just to get her started. The possibilities were endless. After dinner, Marcus sat by his window and looked out at the city lights. He thought about his mother and how she had told him that music had power. She had been right. Music had the power to heal, to connect, to transform. Music had saved his life, and now he was using music to help save others. Marcus picked up his phone and opened his photos. He scrolled back 3 months to the picture someone had sent him from that first evening. There he was, playing violin in the parking lot. There was Emma in her wheelchair, eyes closed, smiling. There was David with tears on his face. There was Gerald standing watch. It was the moment that had changed everything. He stared at that photo for a long time. Then he set his phone down and picked up his violin. He played softly in his apartment, not for an audience, just for himself. Just because he wanted to. Just because music was who he was and what he did and why he existed. The melody floated through his small apartment and leaked out through the walls. In the apartment next door, an elderly woman heard it and smiled. In the apartment below, a man working late on his laptop paused to listen. In the apartment above, a child having trouble sleeping finally relaxed and drifted off.